Billionaire's daughter failed every test, but when a wise janitor revealed her secret, her life transformed, and the billionaire himself fell madly in love with her. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to your own family story channel. On this holy Sunday, may the Almighty cover you with His mercy like the morning sun, and may His Spirit breathe peace into your hearts. May your homes shine with faith, your paths glow with hope, and your souls be lifted in love that never ends. May every storm be calmed, every burden be eased, and may His hand guide you always. Amen. If you are here, write present. If you carry my bond, write I am with Mr. Peter. My precious family, these stories are my prayer to you, my offering of love and hope. But when you leave before the end, it wounds me deeply, as if my devotion and hard work have no value. Please stay. Every moment is crafted with love for you. And to my new family, I don't know why you still doubt me. Ask my old family members. They will tell you of my truth, my care, and my sleepless nights creating for you. Their witness is the proof of my love. The silence in the Gatsby mansion hung heavy as velvet curtains, and 16-year-old Poppy Gatsby sat in its center like a living paradox, intellectually gifted beyond measure, yet systematically destroying her own potential. She stared at the crimson F sprawled across her calculus exam like a wound, and her photographic memory cruelly replayed every correct answer she had deliberately marked wrong. The mahogany desk beneath her shaking hands had witnessed this identical scene 17 times this semester, each intentional failure carving away another piece of her authentic self. Another F, sweetheart. Her father's voice drifted from the doorway, gentle as always, but Poppy heard the exhaustion threading through his words like ivy through a broken fence. Jay Gatsby stepped into the study, his once powerful shoulders now carrying the weight of watching his only child destroy herself one grade at a time. At 40, he had conquered Wall Street, built an empire that spanned continents, and survived the devastating loss of his beloved wife 3 years ago. Yet this one mystery, his daughter's inexplicable academic failures, remained unsolved, eating at him like acid on marble. "I'm sorry, Daddy." Poppy's voice was barely a whisper, but it screamed volumes. She couldn't tell him the truth. How could she explain that 3 months ago she had overheard him on the phone with his business partner, saying he sometimes wished she was just normal like other kids, not this freakishly smart child who makes everyone uncomfortable? How could she reveal that every deliberate failure was her desperate attempt to become the daughter he could love without reservation? Jay knelt beside her chair, his expensive suit creasing as he pulled her into his arms. "Princess, talk to me. I know you're brilliant. I've seen you solve complex equations in your head while watching television. I've watched you read medical journals for fun. What's happening to my little genius?" The irony was exquisite torture. Poppy possessed an IQ that tested in the genius range, a photographic memory that could recall entire textbooks after a single reading, and analytical skills that surpassed most graduate students. Yet here she sat, branded as a failure by her own hand, her father's worry growing like a cancer between them. Meanwhile, 3 floors below in the basement where the school's forgotten corners whispered secrets, Serafina Washington wrung out her mop and felt her heart break a little more. She had been observing Poppy Gatsby for weeks now, watching this brilliant child deliberately sabotage herself with the precision of a surgeon destroying her own masterpiece. At 29, Serafina possessed secrets that would have shocked the wealthy families whose children attended Elmwood Academy. Behind her janitor's uniform and quiet demeanor lived a woman with a PhD in educational psychology from Harvard, published research on gifted children, and an intuitive understanding that recognized wounded potential from across a crowded room. Financial circumstances and family obligations had led her to this humble position, but her calling had never been about the title on her office door. She had been watching Poppy for 3 weeks now, noting the girl's body language during tests, the way her pen would hover over correct answers before deliberately marking wrong ones, the flash of pain that crossed her face with each intentional mistake. Serafina recognized the signs because she had once lived them herself, a brilliant black girl who had learned to hide her intelligence to avoid making others uncomfortable. "That child is killing herself slowly," Serafina murmured to her reflection in the polished floor, her Midwest accent soft as velvet. "And nobody sees it because they're looking at grades instead of souls." Back upstairs, Jay held his daughter as she pretended to struggle with problems she could solve in her sleep. "Maybe we should get you a tutor again," he suggested, though they had been through 6 tutors in the past year, each one baffled by Poppy's apparent inability to retain information she clearly understood. "Maybe," Poppy agreed, her heart fracturing a little more. She loved her father desperately, but the casual comment about wanting a normal daughter had lodged in her chest like a splinter, infected and festering. She would rather be ordinary and loved than brilliant and burdensome. As the days turned into weeks, Serafina continued her careful observation. She watched Poppy in the hallways, noting how the girl's eyes would light up during teacher lectures before dimming deliberately when called upon to participate. She saw how Poppy would help struggling classmates understand complex concepts, only to pretend ignorance when those same concepts appeared on her own tests. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon, when Serafina was cleaning the library and overheard Poppy on the phone with her father. The girl was sitting in the far corner, surrounded by advanced physics books, speaking in hushed tones. "Yes, Daddy, I understand. I'll try harder on tomorrow's test. No, I don't think I need a psychologist. I just want to be the daughter you can be proud of." Serafina's heart clenched as the pieces fell into place. This wasn't learning disability or test anxiety. This was a brilliant child, systematically destroying her own light to become someone she thought her father wanted. It was educational suicide, wrapped in the desperate desire to be loved. That evening, Serafina made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. She would break protocol, risk her job, and reach out to this suffering child, because sometimes she knew love required courage more than caution. Jay tucked Poppy into bed that night, kissing her forehead and whispering, "I love you exactly as you are, sweetheart. Never forget that." But Poppy had already forgotten, the words unable to penetrate the wall of insecurity built by a single overheard comment. She lay in her 4-poster bed, staring at the ceiling and planning tomorrow's failure, unaware that salvation was already planning to find her. In her small apartment across town, Serafina sat at her kitchen table, composing a letter that would begin to heal a broken genius. She wrote about potential and worth, about the courage to shine and the tragedy of dimming one's light for others. She wrote from her heart to another heart that was learning to break itself rather than risk being broken by rejection. The letter would find its way to Poppy's locker tomorrow morning, unsigned, but written with the careful precision of someone who understood that sometimes the most profound transformations begin with a stranger's kindness. As midnight chimed across the city, 3 hearts beat in different rhythms, one breaking itself deliberately, one breaking for its child, and one preparing to mend them both with a truth that would change everything. The stage was set for a love story that would begin with a daughter's healing and bloom into something neither Jay nor Serafina could have imagined. But first, a brilliant girl would have to learn that her light was not a burden to dim, but a gift to celebrate. Tomorrow would bring the first step toward truth, and truth, as Serafina knew, was always the beginning of love. Chapter 2. The Angel in Disguise. The unsigned letter appeared in Poppy's locker like a message from destiny itself, folded with the precision of Japanese origami and written in handwriting so beautiful it could have been mistaken for art. "Dear brilliant soul," it began, and Poppy's breath caught in her throat because no one had called her brilliant in months, not since she had begun her campaign of academic self-destruction. "I have watched you dim your light, and my heart breaks for the genius you're hiding. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are sacrificing your truth for love, but real love would never ask you to become less than you are. If you're ready to stop breaking your own heart, meet me in the rose garden during lunch. Look for the woman who sees your worth even when you cannot." A friend who knows. Poppy read the letter 7 times, her photographic memory capturing every loop and curve of the mysterious handwriting. For the first time in months, something stirred in her chest that felt dangerously close to hope. Serafina spent her morning cleaning classrooms with unusual nervousness, her hands shaking slightly as she dusted desks and swept floors. She had crossed a line by reaching out to Poppy directly, but some hearts called to others across every boundary of protocol and propriety. She had dressed carefully that morning, choosing her finest uniform and pinning her natural hair back in a style that highlighted the elegant bones of her face. At exactly 12:15, Poppy appeared at the entrance to the rose garden like a ghost learning to be human again. She clutched the letter in her trembling fingers, her dark eyes scanning the garden until they settled on a figure sitting beneath the old oak tree. Serafina rose gracefully, and for a moment both females stood frozen in recognition, not of each other, but of kindred spirits who had learned to hide their light in a world that sometimes punished brilliance. "You wrote this?" Poppy's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of desperate hope. "I did." Serafina's voice was warm honey over steel, confident yet gentle. "And I meant every word. May I sit with you?" They settled onto the stone bench beneath the roses, the autumn air sweet with the scent of late blooms. Serafina studied Poppy's face with the careful attention of someone trained to read the hidden stories written in expressions and body language. "Tell me about the tests," Serafina said softly. "Not about the grades, but about what happens inside your heart when you take them." Poppy's facade cracked like ice in spring. "You wouldn't understand, you're just—" She stopped herself, horrified by what she had almost said. "Just a janitor?" Serafina's smile was understanding, not wounded. "Oh, sweet girl, I understand more than you know. I understand what it feels like to be brilliant in a world that's more comfortable when you pretend to be less. I understand the exhaustion of dumbing yourself down to make others feel smart. I understand the loneliness of having a mind that works differently, faster, deeper than those around you." Tears spilled down Poppy's cheeks like diamonds in sunlight. "How do you know?" "Because I've been where you are. I had a mind that could devour textbooks and solve problems that made my teachers nervous, but I learned early that brilliance could be a burden, especially for a black girl from the wrong side of town. So I learned to hide it, to shrink it, to make it small enough that others could tolerate being around me." Serafina reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notebook, its pages filled with complex equations and theoretical frameworks that would have impressed graduate students. "This is who I really am, Poppy. This is what I do when no one's watching. I solve problems, I create theories, I push the boundaries of what's possible. But during the day, I mop floors and empty trash cans, and I let people assume that's all I'm capable of." Poppy stared at the notebook, her brilliant mind immediately recognizing the sophistication of the work. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I see you making the same mistake I made, but for different reasons. You're dimming your light, not because the world can't handle it, but because you think your father can't. You're destroying your own gifts trying to become someone you think he'll love more." The truth hit Poppy like lightning, illuminating corners of her heart she had been keeping dark. "You know about my father? I know that 3 months ago you overheard a phone conversation that broke your heart. I know that you've been failing on purpose ever since, trying to become the normal daughter you think he wants, and I know that every time you write a wrong answer, a part of your soul dies." Poppy sobbed then, great gasping cries that released months of buried pain. Serafina pulled her close, this brilliant broken child, and let her cry against her shoulder until the storm passed. "But what if he really does want me to be normal?" Poppy whispered. "What if my intelligence makes him uncomfortable?" "Then we'll find out together," Serafina said firmly. "But first, you need to remember who you really are. You need to stop sacrificing your gifts on the altar of fear." They spent the next hour in deep conversation, Serafina sharing stories of her own journey towards self-acceptance, while Poppy slowly began to remember the joy she had once found in learning. As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Serafina made a proposal that would change everything. "Meet me here every day during lunch. Let me help you remember how to be brilliant without apology. Let me teach you that intelligence is not a flaw to hide, but a gift to celebrate." "Why would you do this for me?" Poppy asked, her eyes still red from crying but clearer than they had been in months. "Because once upon a time, a stranger showed me that my brilliance was beautiful. Because seeing you dim your light is like watching someone slowly commit suicide. Because you deserve to shine, Poppy Gatsby, and I believe you're brave enough to remember how." As they parted ways, neither noticed the figure watching from the upper windows of the school. Jay Gatsby had arrived early for a parent conference and had witnessed the entire encounter in the garden. He had seen his daughter cry more genuinely than she had in months, had watched a janitor hold her with the tenderness of a mother, and had felt something shift in his chest, like tectonic plates rearranging. Who was this woman who could reach his daughter when he could not? What had she said to make Poppy's face transform from despair to something approaching hope? That evening, as Jay helped Poppy with her homework, he noticed subtle changes. She approached problems differently, with less of the deliberate confusion she had been affecting and more of her natural analytical process. When she caught herself solving an equation quickly, she didn't immediately second-guess herself, as she had been doing for months. "Good day at school?" he asked carefully. "Better," Poppy said, and for the first time in months, she looked him directly in the eyes when she spoke. "Daddy, do you really wish I was normal instead of smart?" Jay's heart stopped. "Where would you get an idea like that?" "I heard you on the phone with Mr. Harrison. You said you sometimes wished I was just normal like other kids." The memory hit Jay like a physical blow. He remembered that conversation, a moment of frustration when his business partner had made a cruel comment about gifted children being freaks of nature. Jay had responded thoughtlessly, speaking from a place of worry about his daughter's social struggles, not from any real desire for her to be different. "Oh, sweetheart," he whispered, pulling her into his arms. "I was never talking about wanting you to be less intelligent. I was worried about you being lonely, about not having friends your age who could relate to you. I would never, ever want you to be anything other than exactly who you are." Poppy cried again, but these were tears of relief. "I thought you were ashamed of how smart I am." "Ashamed? Princess, I am so proud of your brilliance that sometimes I can barely breathe from the force of it. You are the most extraordinary person I know, and your intelligence is one of your greatest gifts." As father and daughter held each other, both healing from months of misunderstanding, Jay found his thoughts drifting to the mysterious woman in the garden. Tomorrow, he decided, he would find out who she was and thank her for giving him his daughter back. He had no idea that this simple desire to express gratitude would lead him to a love story that would reshape his understanding of fate, family, and the unexpected places where angels choose to hide. Chapter 3. The Awakening. The transformation in Poppy Gatsby was nothing short of miraculous, like watching a butterfly remember how to use wings it had deliberately kept folded. Within a week of her first meeting with Serafina, Poppy's teachers began whispering in the faculty lounge about the sudden change in Jay Gatsby's daughter. The girl who had been struggling with basic algebra was now solving calculus problems with an elegance that left her mathematics professor speechless. Her English essays evolved from barely coherent paragraphs to sophisticated analyses that displayed not just intelligence but genuine insight. "It's like someone flipped a switch," Mrs. Patterson, her chemistry teacher, marveled to the principal. "Yesterday she couldn't balance a simple equation. Today she's explaining molecular theory to the other students." Jay watched his daughter's resurrection with a mixture of joy and curiosity that kept him awake at night. He had spoken with every teacher, changed no study methods, hired no new tutors. The only variable in Poppy's academic life was her mysterious daily meetings in the Rose Garden with the school's janitor. He began arriving at the school earlier, staying later, hoping for a glimpse of the woman who had somehow unlocked his daughter's potential. But Serafina was careful, arriving before dawn and leaving after the last parent departed, moving through the halls like a ghost who preferred shadows to spotlights. That evening, as October painted the leaves in shades of amber and gold, fate decided to stop playing hide-and-seek. Jay was leaving a parent-teacher conference, elated by glowing reports of Poppy's academic renaissance, when the autumn sky opened with the sudden fury of a Tennessee Williams play. Rain fell in sheets so thick they transformed the world into watercolor, and he found himself stranded beneath the school's front portico, watching nature's drama unfold. That's when he saw her. Serafina was running across the courtyard in the deluge, but she wasn't seeking shelter for herself. She was rushing toward a figure huddled beneath the old oak tree, his daughter, who had apparently been caught in the storm during what should have been their daily garden meeting. Jay watched, mesmerized, as Serafina reached Poppy and immediately removed her own jacket, wrapping it around the girl's shoulders with movements so tender they spoke of love that transcended job descriptions. She gathered Poppy close, shielding her from the rain with her own body, and began leading her toward the school building. But as they reached the halfway point across the courtyard, Poppy stumbled on the rain-slicked walkway. Before Jay could even think to move, Serafina had caught the girl, lifting her partially off the ground with a strength that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than muscle. It was in that moment, as he watched this woman he'd never met sacrifice her own comfort to protect his daughter, that Jay Gatsby felt something crack open in his chest, something that had been sealed shut since his wife's death 3 years ago. Miss, wait!" he called out, abandoning the shelter of the portico and running into the storm. Serafina looked up as he approached, and Jay felt the world tilt slightly off its axis. Even drenched by rain, even wearing a simple uniform, even with her hair plastered to her head, she was breathtaking. But it wasn't her physical beauty that stopped his heart. It was the depth he saw in her dark eyes, the intelligence that sparkled there like stars in a midnight sky, the compassion that radiated from her like warmth from a fire. "Mr. Gatsby." Serafina's voice carried a slight tremor, whether from cold or something else he couldn't tell. "You're the one," he said, having to shout slightly over the storm. "You're the one who's been helping Poppy." "Daddy!" Poppy's face lit up with genuine happiness, an expression he hadn't seen in months. "This is Serafina. She's been teaching her to remember how brilliant she is," Serafina finished quietly, her eyes never leaving Jay's face. They stood there in the pouring rain, 3 souls connected by something stronger than circumstance, until practical necessity forced them toward shelter. Jay insisted on driving them both home, and as they settled into his Mercedes, he found himself stealing glances at Serafina in the rearview mirror. She sat with perfect posture, her hands folded in her lap, but Jay noticed the way she studied everything. The car's interior, the passing landscape, Poppy's animated chatter about her latest chemistry project. She absorbed information like a scholar, processing and cataloging details with an intensity that spoke of a mind accustomed to deep thinking. "Miss..." Jay realized he didn't know her last name. Washington, she supplied. Serafina Washington. Miss Washington, I don't know how to thank you for what you've done for Poppy. Her teachers say it's like she's become a completely different student. She was always this student, Serafina replied, her eyes meeting his in the mirror. She just needed permission to stop hiding. The simple truth of that statement hit Jay like revelation. His daughter hadn't needed fixing. She had needed freedom. Freedom from the fear that her intelligence made her unlovable. How did you know? He asked. How did you see what we all missed? Serafina was quiet for a long moment, watching raindrops race down the window. Sometimes it takes one hidden thing to recognize another, she said finally. Brilliance has a way of calling to brilliance, even when both are wrapped in disguise. There was something in her tone, a hint of deeper meaning that made Jay look at her more carefully. This was no ordinary janitor. The way she spoke, the vocabulary she chose, the elegant way she held herself, everything about Serafina Washington suggested depths that her job title couldn't contain. Would you? Jay began, then stopped himself. What was he doing? He barely knew this woman, yet something about her drew him like gravity. Would I what, Mr. Gatsby? Would you join us for dinner? Tonight? I'd like to properly thank you for everything you've done for my daughter. Serafina hesitated, and Jay saw something flicker across her face. Uncertainty, perhaps, or fear. I don't think that would be appropriate, Mr. Gatsby. You're just the woman who saved my daughter's soul, Jay interrupted gently. That makes you the most important person in my world right now. Please, let me cook for you. Let us show you what your kindness has meant to our family. Poppy turned around in her seat, her eyes bright with excitement. Please say yes. Daddy makes the most amazing lasagna, and I want to show you my chemistry set. Looking into those two hopeful faces, Serafina felt her careful walls begin to crumble. She had spent 3 years maintaining professional distance, keeping her personal life and her work life in separate, sealed compartments. But this man and his daughter were offering something she hadn't experienced in far too long, genuine human connection. I suppose, for a little while, she said softly. The joy that spread across Jay's face was like sunrise after a long night, and Serafina felt something dangerous flutter in her chest. This was how hearts got broken, by men who looked at you like you were the answer to prayers they hadn't known they were praying. But as she watched Poppy bounce with excitement in the front seat, chattering about showing off her improved grades and her scientific experiments, Serafina allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to be part of a family again. That evening would mark the beginning of something neither Jay nor Serafina could have predicted. A love story that would challenge everything they thought they knew about fate, family, and the beautiful complexity of human connection. But first, there would be dinner, conversation, and the gradual revelation that sometimes the most profound relationships begin with the simple act of sharing a meal and opening hearts that have learned to hide their hungers. Chapter 4. When Hearts Collide. The Gatsby mansion at twilight looked like something from a fairy tale, its Georgian columns bathed in golden light, and its windows glowing with warmth that beckoned like promises of home. Serafina stood on the front steps, her heart hammering against her ribs as she smoothed her simple black dress, the finest thing in her modest wardrobe, yet still inadequate for such grandeur. She had changed clothes 3 times, each outfit a reminder of the vast gulf between her world and that of the man who had invited her into his. Jay opened the door before she could knock, and the sight of him nearly stole her breath. Gone was the rain-soaked businessman from earlier. In his place stood a man who looked younger somehow, more relaxed, wearing dark jeans and a cream-colored sweater that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. His graying hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it nervously, and there was something vulnerable in his blue eyes that made her chest tight. Serafina, he said, her name rolling off his tongue like a prayer. Thank you for coming. Thank you for having me, she replied, then immediately felt foolish for the formal response. But being here, in this palace disguised as a home, reminded her sharply of the differences between them, differences that went far beyond mere economics. Serafina! Poppy's voice rang out from somewhere in the depths of the house, followed by the sound of running feet. The girl appeared at her father's side, practically glowing with excitement. I have so much to show you. My chemistry set, my latest test scores, the essay I wrote about molecular biology. Jay laughed, a sound so rich and warm it seemed to wrap around Serafina like velvet. Let the poor woman get inside first, princess. She's probably wondering what she's gotten herself into. As they moved through the house, Serafina tried not to gawk at the obvious wealth surrounding her, the original art on the walls, the Persian rugs beneath her feet, the crystal chandelier that threw rainbows across the foyer. But what struck her more than the luxury was the warmth of it all, the sense that this was truly a home where love lived, not just a showcase of material success. My wife decorated most of this, Jay said quietly, noticing her thoughtful expression. She had an eye for making grand spaces feel intimate. Serafina heard the note of lingering grief in his voice and felt something tender unfurl in her chest. She had beautiful taste. It feels like a home, not a museum. That's exactly what she would have wanted to hear. The kitchen was a chef's dream, all marble countertops and professional-grade appliances, but it was clear that Jay actually cooked here. The space had the lived-in feel of a room that saw daily use, and the scents filling the air, garlic, herbs, something rich and savory, made Serafina's mouth water. I hope you like Italian food, Jay said, moving to the stove where something bubbled in a large pot. Cooking helps me think, and I had a lot to think about today. What kind of thinking? Serafina asked, accepting the glass of wine he offered her. Jay met her eyes over his wineglass, and something passed between them. Electric, undeniable, terrifying in its intensity. Thinking about miracles, about angels who disguise themselves as janitors, about how sometimes the most important people come into our lives when we least expect them. Serafina felt heat rise in her cheeks. Mr. Gatsby? Jay, he corrected softly. Please, after what you've done for my daughter, for our family, I think we're beyond formalities. During dinner, Serafina found herself relaxing despite her initial nervousness. Jay was an engaging conversationalist, drawing her out with questions that showed genuine interest in her thoughts and opinions. He asked about her childhood, her dreams, her perspectives on everything from education to literature to the proper way to make cornbread. You grew up in Tennessee? Jay asked, refilling her wineglass. Small town outside Nashville, Serafina confirmed. Population 800 on a good day. My grandmother raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. That must have been difficult. It was, but my grandmother was extraordinary. She cleaned houses for wealthy families, but she was the smartest person I've ever known. She taught me that intelligence has nothing to do with the job you do to survive, and everything to do with how you choose to see the world. Jay found himself hanging on every word. There was something mesmerizing about the way Serafina spoke, thoughtful, articulate, with a quiet confidence that suggested depths he was only beginning to glimpse. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. She died 5 years ago, but I still hear her voice sometimes, reminding me that I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. Serafina paused, then added quietly, She would have liked you. How can you be so sure? Because she always said that good hearts recognize each other, regardless of circumstances, and you, Jay Gatsby, have a very good heart. The use of his first name sent warmth spreading through Jay's chest like whiskey on a cold night. When was the last time a woman had looked at him and seen past the money, the status, the carefully constructed exterior to the man underneath? "Daddy, can I show Serafina my chemistry set now?" Poppy interrupted, having politely endured the adult conversation for as long as her teenager patience would allow. For the next hour, Jay watched as Serafina engaged with his daughter's scientific enthusiasm with the focus of a professor. She asked intelligent questions, offered thoughtful observations, and when Poppy struggled to explain a complex concept, Serafina guided her through it with a teaching skill that left Jay wondering once again who this woman really was. "You're very good at that," he commented when Poppy left to retrieve another experiment. "At what?" "Teaching. The way you explain things, the way you listen, it's like you've done this before." Serafina's hands stilled on the chemistry equipment. "I've always loved learning. I suppose it's natural to want to share that with others." Jay sensed there was more to the story, but before he could pursue it, Poppy returned with her latest creation, a small volcano that erupted with satisfying drama, sending both adults into appreciative applause. As the evening wound down, Jay found himself desperately searching for reasons to extend it. He had felt more alive in the past few hours than he had in 3 years, more like himself than he remembered being since before his wife's death. "I should go," Serafina said as Poppy finally headed upstairs to tackle homework. "Thank you for a lovely evening and for letting me share in Poppy's excitement about her work. Thank you for everything you've done for her, for us." Jay walked her to the door, his heart already dreading her departure. "Serafina, would you consider having dinner with us again? Tomorrow night, perhaps?" She turned to face him fully, and Jay saw something flicker in her eyes, want, perhaps, warring with caution. "I don't think that would be wise." "Why not?" "Because—" She struggled for words that wouldn't reveal too much. "Because we're from different worlds, Jay. Because I'm not the kind of woman who belongs in a house like this." Jay stepped closer, close enough to catch the faint scent of her perfume, something light and floral that suited her perfectly. "You're exactly the kind of woman who belongs here. You're kind, intelligent, beautiful." "Stop," she whispered, but her eyes said something entirely different. "I can't. Not when I see the way you light up this house just by being in it. Not when my daughter smiles more in one evening with you than she has in months. Not when you make me feel like—" "Like what?" "Like maybe it's possible to fall in love twice in one lifetime." The words hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they were brave enough to cross. Serafina's breath caught, her heart hammering so hard she was certain he could hear it. "Jay, you don't understand." "Then help me understand. Have dinner with me tomorrow. Let me get to know the woman who's already changed my life." Looking into his eyes, seeing the hope and longing there, Serafina felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. This man was dangerous, not because he would hurt her intentionally, but because he made her want things she had convinced herself were impossible. "One more dinner," she agreed softly. "But then we need to talk about boundaries." Jay's smile was radiant. "One more dinner, though I should warn you, I'm a very persuasive cook." As she walked to her car, Serafina tried to ignore the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like her grandmother, whispering that some chances were worth the risk of heartbreak. Behind her, Jay stood in his doorway, watching her taillights disappear into the night and already planning tomorrow's menu. He had no idea that he was falling in love with a woman whose secrets would soon turn his understanding of fate upside down. But tonight, under a canopy of autumn stars, all that mattered was the promise of tomorrow and the hope that maybe, just maybe, his heart was ready to love again. Chapter 5. The Miracle. The morning of Poppy's college entrance exams dawned crisp and clear, with autumn sunlight streaming through the windows of the Gatsby mansion like golden promises of triumph. Jay stood in the kitchen, nervously preparing what had become their good-luck breakfast, blueberry pancakes shaped like stars, Poppy's favorite since childhood, while his daughter sat at the marble island, radiating a calm confidence that still amazed him. 2 months ago, she had been a gifted girl, deliberately failing every test. Today, she was about to take the most important academic assessment of her young life. "You ready for this, princess?" Jay asked, setting a plate before her with the careful precision of a man who understood that some rituals were sacred. "More than ready," Poppy replied, her voice steady and sure. "Serafina says I should trust my instincts today. She says my mind knows what to do. I just have to get out of its way." At the mention of Serafina's name, Jay felt the familiar flutter in his chest that had been his constant companion for the past 3 weeks. 3 weeks of dinners, conversations that stretched into the early hours of morning, and a growing attraction that defied every rational thought in his head. Serafina Washington had become the center of his universe, without him quite understanding how it had happened. She arrived each evening at exactly 6 o'clock, bringing books that she shared with Poppy, stories that made them all laugh until their sides ached, and a presence that transformed his house into something warmer and more complete than it had been since his wife's death. But she remained an enigma wrapped in mystery. Despite their growing closeness, she revealed little about her past, her education, or her dreams. When he asked direct questions, she deflected with the skill of a diplomat, turning conversations back to him or Poppy with such grace that he barely noticed the evasion until after she had gone. "She's coming to watch you take the test," Jay said, unable to keep the warmth from his voice. Poppy's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really?" She said she might not be able to get away from work. "She called this morning. Apparently she told the school it was a family emergency." The word family hung in the air between them, laden with possibilities neither quite dared to voice. Over the past weeks, Serafina had woven herself so seamlessly into their lives that her absence left a palpable void. Dinners without her felt incomplete, conversations lacked their usual spark, and Jay found himself counting the hours until her return like a lovesick teenager. They arrived at the testing center to find Serafina waiting by the entrance, elegant in a navy blue dress that Jay had never seen before. She looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, dark eyes scanning the crowd of students and parents with the intensity of someone with a personal stake in the outcome. "You came," Poppy breathed, rushing into Serafina's arms with the abandon of a child who had found her anchor. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," Serafina replied, holding the girl tight. "This is your moment to shine, brilliant one. Are you ready to show the world what I already know?" Jay watched the exchange with growing wonder. There was something so natural about the way they interacted, so right, that it took his breath away. Serafina looked up and caught his stare, and the smile she gave him was soft, intimate, full of shared pride for this remarkable girl they both loved. "She's going to be extraordinary," Serafina murmured as they watched Poppy disappear into the testing room with her newfound confidence. "She already is," Jay replied. "Thanks to you." They settled into the uncomfortable chairs of the waiting area, surrounded by other anxious parents, but somehow existing in their own bubble of shared anticipation. Jay found himself studying Serafina's profile, memorizing the elegant curve of her neck, the way she worried her lower lip when nervous, the graceful way her hands moved when she spoke. "Tell me something," he said suddenly. "What? Anything. Something real about you that I don't already know." Serafina turned to face him fully, her dark eyes searching his face. "Why?" "Because I'm falling in love with you, and I want to know the woman who's capturing my heart." The words escaped before he could stop them, raw and honest and completely inappropriate for a public waiting room. But Jay had never been good at hiding his feelings, and 3 weeks of growing attraction had finally reached its breaking point. Serafina's breath caught, her eyes widening with something that looked like panic. "Jay, you can't say things like that." "Why not? It's true." "Because it's not that simple. Because you don't know who I really am." "Then tell me. Whatever it is, whatever you're hiding, it doesn't matter." Before Serafina could respond, a commotion erupted from the testing room. A proctor emerged, looking flustered, followed by a small group of officials who were speaking in hushed, urgent tones. "Is there a problem?" Jay was on his feet immediately, his protective instincts flaring. "Are you Poppy Gatsby's father?" one of the officials asked. "Yes. What's wrong? Is she hurt?" "She's fine, sir. More than fine, actually." The woman's expression shifted from concern to amazement. "Mr. Gatsby, your daughter just completed a 4-hour exam in 90 minutes. She achieved the fastest completion time we've ever recorded." Jay felt his knees go weak. Did she actually complete it, or did she give up? "She completed every section, every question. The proctors have never seen anything like it." She sat down, reviewed the entire test in about 10 minutes, then went back and answered every question with absolute certainty. No hesitation, no second-guessing, no returning to change responses. Serafina grabbed Jay's hand, her fingers trembling with excitement. She did it. She really did it. "The preliminary scoring won't be available for several weeks," the official continued, "but based on what we observed, I think you should prepare yourself for some very good news." When Poppy emerged from the testing room, she was glowing with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had just conquered Everest. She walked straight to Serafina and Jay, her smile radiant and sure. "How do you feel?" Serafina asked. "Like myself," Poppy replied simply. "For the first time in almost a year, I felt like myself. The questions weren't enemies to defeat, they were puzzles to solve, and I love puzzles." Jay pulled both of them into his arms, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. Standing there in that anonymous waiting room, holding the two most important people in his world, he felt complete in a way he hadn't experienced since before tragedy had taught him that happiness was fragile. "Dinner," he announced. "The fanciest restaurant in the city. We're celebrating." "I should probably," Serafina began. "You should celebrate with us," Jay interrupted firmly. "This is as much your victory as it is Poppy's. Without you, none of this would have happened." That evening, at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the glittering city, Jay watched Serafina across the candle-lit table and felt certainty settle in his bones like truth. Whatever secrets she was keeping, whatever reasons she had for maintaining distance between them, he was going to fight for this. For her, for them, for the family they could become. "A toast," he said, raising his wine glass. "To Poppy, for remembering how brilliant she is. To second chances and new beginnings. And to the woman who made it all possible." Serafina's eyes filled with tears as she raised her glass. "To brave hearts and beautiful souls, and to the family that saved me without even knowing I needed saving." As their glasses clinked together, none of them could have predicted that within 2 weeks, Poppy would receive the highest score in the state's testing history, or that her achievement would attract national attention and college recruiters from every Ivy League school in the country. But more importantly, none of them could have foreseen that this moment, this perfect, golden moment of shared triumph, would be the last time they were simply Jay, Serafina, and Poppy, before the revelations that would change everything they thought they knew about fate, family, and the beautiful complications of love. The miracle of Poppy's transformation was complete. Now, the real test would begin. Chapter 6. The First Breathtaking Twist. The package arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick and official-looking, bearing the seal of Harvard University and addressed to Poppy Gatsby in elegant script that seemed to whisper of ivy-covered dreams and academic glory. Jay found it on the front doorstep when he went to retrieve the morning paper, and his hands shook slightly as he carried it inside. 3 weeks had passed since Poppy's record-breaking performance on the college entrance exams. 3 weeks of waiting and hoping and trying not to let anticipation consume them all. "Poppy!" he called up the stairs, his voice tight with nervous excitement. "There's something here for you." She appeared at the top of the staircase, still in her pajamas, her hair in a messy bun, looking every inch the 17-year-old she was, rather than the academic prodigy who had shattered state testing records. But when she saw the package in her father's hands, her eyes went wide with understanding. "Is that Harvard?" Jay confirmed, holding it out to her with trembling fingers. "Do you want to open it, or should I?" "Together," Poppy said, settling beside him on the couch in the living room where morning sunlight painted everything golden. "But first, we should call Serafina. She should be here for this." Jay's heart did that familiar flutter at the mention of her name. Their relationship had deepened over the past weeks into something that defied easy categorization, more than friendship, but undefined in its boundaries, filled with longing looks and careful touches and conversations that danced around the truth they both felt, but neither had fully voiced since that day in the hospital waiting room. "She's at work," Jay said gently, "and this is your moment, Princess." "Our moment," Poppy corrected firmly. "None of this would have happened without her. I'm not opening this without all my family here." The word family made Jay's chest tight with hope and possibility. Without argument, he pulled out his phone and dialed Serafina's number. "Jay," her voice was soft, concerned. "Is everything all right? The letter from Harvard came. Poppy won't open it without you here." There was silence on the other end of the line, then a sharp intake of breath. I can't leave work right now. Mr. Peterson is—" "Tell him it's a family emergency," Jay interrupted. "Tell him whatever you need to tell him. Please, Serafina. You belong here for this." Another pause, then, "Give me 20 minutes. She arrived in 18 minutes, slightly breathless, wearing her custodial uniform but somehow managing to look elegant despite the utilitarian clothing. Her dark eyes were bright with nervous excitement, and when Poppy launched herself into her arms, Serafina held her tight, her own hands trembling slightly. "Ready?" Jay asked when they were all settled on the couch, the unopened envelope lying on the coffee table before them like a promise or a threat. Poppy picked up the envelope with ceremonial care, slid her finger beneath the seal, and extracted the contents with the reverence of someone handling ancient manuscripts. She unfolded the letter, her eyes scanning the text, and suddenly her face went completely white. "What does it say?" Serafina asked urgently. Poppy's voice was barely a whisper. "Daddy, I think you should read this." Jay took the letter with growing concern, worried that his daughter had somehow been rejected despite her extraordinary scores. But as his eyes moved across the elegant Harvard letterhead, his expression shifted from concern to shock to something approaching disbelief. "Dear Miss Gatsby," the letter began, "We are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Harvard University with the highest entrance scores in our institution's 387-year history. Your performance represents not just academic excellence, but a level of intellectual capability that occurs perhaps once in a generation." "You got in," Jay breathed. "Princess, you didn't just get in, you broke their record too." But there was more. As Jay continued reading, the letter revealed that Harvard was offering Poppy a full scholarship, placement in their most accelerated program, and the opportunity to begin taking graduate-level courses as a freshman. "I can't believe it," Poppy whispered, tears streaming down her face. 6 months ago, I was failing basic algebra." 6 months ago, you were hiding your light," Serafina corrected gently, pulling the girl close. "Now you're letting it shine, and the whole world can see how brilliant you've always been." Jay looked at Serafina across his daughter's head, and the love he saw shining in her dark eyes took his breath away. This woman had given him back his daughter, had helped heal wounds he hadn't even known were bleeding, had become so essential to their happiness that he couldn't imagine life without her. "We need to celebrate," he said suddenly. "Dinner, champagne, the works. What do you say we—" "Actually," Serafina interrupted softly, "there's something I need to tell you both. Something I should have told you weeks ago." There was something in her tone that made Jay's stomach clench with sudden apprehension. Serafina stood and moved to the window, her back to them, her shoulders tense with what looked like anxiety or fear. "Remember when you asked me how I knew what Poppy was going through? How I recognized the signs of a brilliant child hiding her intelligence?" "You said you'd been through something similar," Jay replied carefully. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. Serafina turned to face them, her expression vulnerable and afraid. "Jay, Poppy, I haven't been entirely honest about who I am." Jay felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "What do you mean?" Serafina took a deep breath, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn book. She handed it to Poppy, who looked down at the cover with growing confusion. "The Secret Garden of Dreams," Poppy read aloud. This is one of my favorite books. I've had it since I was 8, but I don't understand." "Look at the author," Serafina said quietly. Poppy's eyes moved to the author's name on the cover, and her face went blank with shock. "S.R. Washington," she read. "But that's your—" "My pen name," Serafina confirmed. "Serafina Rose Washington." The book fell from Poppy's nerveless fingers as the implications hit her. Jay stared at the author photo on the back cover, a younger Serafina perhaps 5 years ago, but unmistakably her. "You wrote this," he said, his voice hollow with shock. "You wrote Poppy's favorite book." "I wrote the entire series," Serafina replied, her voice gaining strength as the truth emerged. 12 books about children discovering their unique gifts, learning to embrace what makes them exceptional. "I have a PhD in educational psychology from Columbia, specialized in gifted children. I've published research papers, consulted with schools, worked with hundreds of families." "Then why—" Jay struggled to process the revelation. "Why are you working as a janitor?" Serafina's laugh was bitter, painful. "Student loans, medical bills from my grandmother's final illness, a relationship that ended badly, leaving me financially devastated. Sometimes life forces you to take whatever job pays the bills while you rebuild. But I stayed at the school because I could still help children there, even if nobody knew my real qualifications." Poppy had gone very quiet, her brilliant mind clearly working through all the implications. "You've been studying me this whole time," she said slowly, "professionally. I was a case study to you." "No!" Serafina's voice was fierce, desperate. "Poppy, no! Yes, I recognized the signs because of my training, but everything that came after, every conversation, every moment of caring, that was real. You weren't a case study, you were a suffering child who needed help, and I happened to be qualified to give it." Jay stood abruptly, pacing to the fireplace, his mind reeling. "So everything, the way you knew exactly how to help her, the way you could explain complex concepts, the way you connected with her intellectually, it was all because you're a doctor, an expert." "My feelings for both of you are real," Serafina said, her voice breaking slightly. "My love for Poppy, my feelings for you, Jay. None of that was professional. None of that was calculated." "But you deceived us," Jay said, turning to face her, his blue eyes dark with betrayal. "For weeks, you let us believe you were just a kind janitor with natural insight. You let me fall in love with someone who doesn't even exist." "I exist," Serafina whispered. "The woman you've gotten to know, the woman who cares about your daughter, the woman who— What? Who thought she'd play social experiment with the wealthy widower and his damaged daughter?" The words hung in the air like poison, and Jay saw Serafina flinch as if he had struck her. Poppy gasped, tears streaming down her face as she watched the two people she loved most tear each other apart. "That's not what this was," Serafina said, her voice steady despite the tears now flowing freely. "I never meant for it to go this far. I never meant to fall in love with you. I was trying to help a child, and somewhere along the way, I found a family I never knew I was looking for." "Stop," Jay said, his voice cold. "Just stop. I need to think. I can't do this right now." Serafina nodded, her shoulders sagging with defeat. "I understand. I'll go." "No!" Poppy jumped up, positioning herself between them. "This is ridiculous. Who cares what her job title is? Who cares about her degrees? She helped me when no one else could. She made our family whole again, and you're going to throw that away because of pride." "It's not about pride, Princess," Jay said gently. "It's about trust, about truth." "The truth is that she loves us," Poppy shot back. "The truth is that she saved my life. The truth is that you've been happier these past weeks than you've been since Mom died. Are you really going to destroy all of that because she didn't tell you about her education?" Jay looked at his daughter, intellectually gifted, insightful, heartbroken, then at Serafina, who stood frozen by the door like a deer caught in headlights. "I need time," he said finally. "I need to process this. I need to understand what's real and what's been performance." Serafina nodded again, gathered her purse, and walked toward the door. But she paused at the threshold, looking back at them with eyes full of love and loss. "Congratulations on Harvard, Poppy. You deserve every amazing thing that's coming your way. And Jay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't trust you enough to tell you the truth from the beginning. I'm sorry I let you fall in love with half a story." She left then, quietly, leaving behind only the scent of her perfume and the sound of Poppy's quiet sobs. As the door closed behind her, Jay sank back onto the couch, his head in his hands, wondering how the most perfect day could have turned into such devastation, and whether love could survive the weight of truth when that truth felt like betrayal. The first twist had been revealed, but the story was far from over. Sometimes the deepest truths require the greatest courage to accept, and Jay Gatsby was about to learn that real love means loving someone not despite their secrets, but because of their courage in finally sharing them. Chapter 7. Love Confessed. 5 days of silence stretched between them like an ocean, deep and turbulent and seemingly impossible to cross. Jay spent those days in a haze of confusion and hurt, replaying every conversation he'd had with Serafina, searching for clues he'd missed, analyzing every word for signs of deception or manipulation. But the more he remembered, the more confused he became, because nothing about her treatment of Poppy had felt clinical or calculated. Her love for his daughter was real. He'd stake his life on that truth. The mansion felt hollow without her presence. Meals tasted like ash, and even Poppy's joy over her Harvard acceptance couldn't fill the void that Serafina's absence had created. His daughter, meanwhile, had moved through her own stages of grief. Anger at his stubbornness, sadness at losing the woman who had become like a mother to her, and finally, a quiet determination that worried him more than her tears had. On Friday evening, as autumn rain drummed against the windows of his study, Jay sat staring at the fire, a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand, and Serafina's book, Poppy's favorite book, open on his lap. He had read it 3 times now, searching for answers, and what he found there broke his heart in entirely new ways. The story was about a young girl named Luna, who discovered she could make plants grow with just her touch, but who hid her gift because she thought it made her strange and unlovable. Through a series of gentle adventures, Luna learned that her differences were not flaws to hide, but powers to celebrate, that love meant being accepted for exactly who she was, magic and all. Reading it, Jay could see Poppy in every page, brilliant, scared, desperate to be normal instead of extraordinary, But he could also see Serafina pouring her heart into words that would help children like his daughter learn to love themselves. This wasn't the work of someone calculating or cold. This was the work of someone who understood broken hearts intimately and wanted to heal them. "Daddy?" Poppy's voice interrupted his brooding. She stood in the doorway, wearing her mother's old robe, looking far older than her 17 years. "We need to talk." "I know what you're going to say, Princess." "Do you?" She moved into the room with the determination of someone who'd made a difficult decision. "Because I don't think you do. I don't think you understand what you're throwing away." Jay set down his whiskey and closed the book, giving his daughter his full attention. "Then tell me." Poppy settled into the chair across from him, her dark eyes serious. "Do you remember the night Mom died?" The question hit Jay like a physical blow. "Poppy, I don't see what... Do you remember what you said to me? When I asked if she was really gone?" Jay's throat tightened with the memory. "I told you that love never really dies, that the people who love us become part of who we are, and they stay with us always. And do you remember what else you said?" He closed his eyes, the memory as sharp as if it had happened yesterday. "I said that someday, if we were very lucky, we might find another kind of love. Different from what we had with Mom, but just as real. You said Mom would want us to be happy. You said she would want us to love again when we were ready." Poppy leaned forward, her voice gentle but insistent. "Daddy, I think we're ready. It's not that simple. It is that simple." Poppy's voice grew stronger. "Serafina loves us. Not her patients, not her case studies. Us. She loves me enough to spend her lunch breaks helping me remember how to be myself. She loves you enough to bring light back into your eyes for the first time since Mom died. And you love her too, even if you're too scared to admit it right now." Jay wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the wall of hurt and betrayal he'd built around his heart. But his daughter's words were like water wearing away stone, revealing the truth beneath. "She lied to me, Poppy. She protected herself. There's a difference." Poppy's voice was firm, certain. "Do you have any idea how hard it must be for a black woman with a PhD to take a job as a janitor? How much pride she must have had to swallow? How much judgment she must face every day from people who think they know her worth based on her uniform?" Jay felt shame prick at his conscience. He hadn't considered that perspective, had been too focused on his own sense of betrayal to think about what might have driven Serafina to hide her true qualifications. She stayed at that school for years, helping kids like me, and nobody knew or cared about her real education. But she did it anyway, because she cares more about helping people than getting credit for it. Poppy stood, moving to kneel beside his chair like she had when she was small and needed to make him understand something important. "Daddy, she's not the villain in this story. She's the hero, and you're about to lose her because you're too proud to see it." Poppy's voice grew softer, more vulnerable. "When Mom died, you told me that love doesn't end. It transforms. You said Mom would always be part of us, guiding us toward the people and experiences that would help us heal. Don't you see? Serafina isn't replacing Mom. She's Mom's gift to us. She's the love that came after, the healing we didn't even know we needed." Tears slipped down Jay's cheeks as his daughter's wisdom pierced through his stubborn pride. Before Jay could respond, Poppy pulled out her phone and showed him the screen. "She's been texting me every day since she left, asking how I'm doing, if I need help with anything, reminding me that I'm brilliant and brave and worthy of every opportunity coming my way. She's not trying to win me back or manipulate the situation. She's just being herself, loving me because that's who she is." Jay stared at the messages, each one a small masterpiece of encouragement and affection, and felt his remaining defenses crumble. "I've made a terrible mistake, haven't I?" "Yeah," Poppy said gently, "but it's not too late to fix it." That night, after Poppy had gone to bed, Jay sat in his study with a laptop and spent hours researching everything he could find about Dr. Serafina Washington. What he discovered made his chest tight with awe and shame in equal measure. She was renowned in her field, had published groundbreaking research on the emotional needs of gifted children, had consulted with some of the most prestigious schools in the country. Her children's books had won awards, been translated into 12 languages, helped thousands of families navigate the complex world of raising exceptional children. As Jay scrolled through academic articles, he found interview after interview where colleagues praised her innovative approach to child psychology. One Harvard professor called her a once-in-a-generation mind. A Yale researcher described her work as revolutionary in its compassion. She was brilliant, accomplished, respected in academic circles, and she had been cleaning his daughter's school for 3 years because life had dealt her a series of devastating financial blows that had forced her to take whatever work she could find. The articles he found painted a picture of a woman who had lost everything: her savings, her home, her prestigious position, caring for her dying grandmother, and who had clawed her way back with quiet dignity and determination. One piece mentioned how she'd quietly paid for her grandmother's experimental treatments with her entire retirement fund. Another detailed how she'd sold her home to cover medical bills, never once complaining or seeking sympathy. She could have returned to the academic world by now, could have leveraged her reputation into a comfortable position at any university, but she had stayed at Elmwood Academy because she could do the most good there, helping children who might otherwise fall through the cracks. Jay sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the magnitude of her sacrifice and strength. This wasn't just a brilliant woman. This was a hero who had been invisible in plain sight. Saturday morning found Jay standing outside Serafina's modest apartment building, a bouquet of white roses in one hand and his heart in his throat. He had woken before dawn, unable to sleep, and had spent 2 hours at the florist choosing the perfect arrangement: white roses for new beginnings, baby's breath for everlasting love, and a single red rose hidden in the center for passion. He had changed his shirt 3 times, rehearsed his apology in the mirror until the words felt natural, and driven to her apartment twice before finally working up the courage to park and walk to her door. His hands were shaking as he climbed the stairs to her second-floor apartment, each step feeling like both an eternity and happening too fast. Standing outside her door now, he could hear soft music playing inside, classical piano, something melancholy that made his chest ache. He took a deep breath, whispered a quick prayer to Catherine for courage, and knocked. When the door opened and he saw her, all his carefully planned words fled when she opened the door. She looked smaller somehow, fragile in a way she had never seemed before. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying, and when she saw him, her face cycled through surprise, hope, and carefully guarded caution. "Jay," she said quietly, "what are you doing here?" "Making the biggest mistake of my life," he replied. "If you'll let me." She stepped aside wordlessly, allowing him into her small apartment. It was neat and warm, filled with books and plants and photographs, the home of someone who understood that beauty came from love, not money. "I read about you," Jay said without preamble. "Everything. Your research, your books, your work with gifted children. I know about your grandmother, about what you sacrificed to care for her. I know about the ex-fiancé who left you with his debts. I know you could have any position you wanted in the academic world, but you chose to stay at Elmwood because that's where you could help the most kids." Serafina sank onto her couch, looking exhausted. "Why are you here, Jay?" "Because I'm an idiot. Because I let pride and hurt blind me to what actually matters. Because you are the most extraordinary woman I've ever met, and I was too stupid to see it." He knelt before her, setting the roses aside, taking her hands in his. "You saved my daughter's life. You brought joy back into my world. You made me remember what it felt like to love someone, and I threw it all away because I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that you were too good to be true. Scared that someone like you could never really love someone like me. When I found out about your education, your accomplishments, it confirmed my worst fears, that I wasn't worthy of you, that you must have had some other reason for being with us. Serafina's eyes filled with tears. Jay, I love you, he said urgently. I love your intellect, your compassion, your resilience. I love the way you see potential in wounded souls and help them heal. I love how you made Poppy believe in herself again. I love how you inspire me to be a better man. I love you not despite your secrets, but because you trusted me enough to finally share them. I should have told you sooner, she whispered. Maybe, but I understand why you didn't. I understand why someone who's been hurt would protect themselves. I understand why you'd want to be loved for who you are as a person, not for your titles or achievements. Jay cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the tears that had begun to fall. Marry me, Serafina. Not because you're Dr. Washington with a PhD and best-selling books. Not because you're Serafina the janitor who sees beauty in humble work. Marry me because you're the woman who loves my daughter like she's your own, who brings light wherever you go, who makes our broken family whole. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, his hands trembling slightly. I know this is sudden. I know we've only known each other for 2 months, but I bought this ring 3 days ago before I even knew the truth about your past, because my heart already knew what my head was too scared to accept. He opened the box to reveal a stunning sapphire surrounded by diamonds, the deep blue stone catching the afternoon light streaming through her windows. It's not a diamond, he said softly. Diamonds are about hardness, about cutting through everything in their path. But sapphires represent wisdom, loyalty, nobility. They represent the kind of love that sees clearly, that chooses to love someone completely, flaws and all. Serafina stared at the ring through her tears, overwhelmed by its beauty and the thought he'd put into choosing it. Jay, we've only known each other for 2 months. I've known you my whole life, he interrupted. I just didn't know I was looking for you until I found you. Marry me, and let's give Poppy the family she deserves. Let's give ourselves the love we thought we'd never find again. Serafina searched his eyes, looking for doubt or reservation, finding only love and certainty and hope. Are you sure? Really sure? Because I can't survive losing you again. I'm sure, Jay said, his voice steady and strong. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you, Serafina Washington. All of you. Every secret, every story, every beautiful contradiction that makes you who you are. She kissed him then, pouring months of hidden feelings into that single touch, and Jay felt his world realign around this truth. Sometimes love means loving someone not despite their complexity, but because of it. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Serafina whispered against his lips, "Yes, yes, I'll marry you. Yes, to all of it." And in that small apartment, surrounded by books and dreams and second chances, 2 hearts that had learned to love again sealed their promise with kisses that tasted like forever. There was still one more secret waiting to be revealed, one more twist that would shake the very foundations of what they thought they knew about fate and family. But for now, in this perfect moment, love was enough. Love was everything. Chapter 8. The Beautiful Struggle. The engagement ring felt like a promise and a prayer on Serafina's finger as she sat in the garden behind Jay's mansion, watching October paint the world in shades of amber and gold. 3 weeks had passed since his proposal. 3 weeks of planning a Christmas wedding and navigating the delicate dance of blending their lives. On the surface, everything was perfect. Poppy had been accepted to Harvard with full honors. The school year was progressing smoothly, and Jay looked at Serafina each morning like she was a miracle he still couldn't quite believe was real. But beneath the happiness, Serafina felt the weight of one final secret pressing against her chest like a stone, growing heavier with each passing day. She had told Jay about her education, her career, her books, but there was one truth she hadn't shared, one revelation that would change everything they thought they understood about fate and destiny. "Penny for your thoughts?" Jay's voice interrupted her brooding as he settled beside her on the garden bench, 2 cups of coffee warming his hands. "Just thinking about the wedding," she lied smoothly, accepting the cup he offered. 3 months feels both like forever and no time at all." Jay studied her face with the careful attention of a man who had learned to read her moods. "That's not your wedding planning expression. That's your 'I'm carrying the weight of the world' expression. What's really wrong?" Serafina felt her heart clench with love and terror in equal measure. Jay knew her so well now, could read the subtleties of her emotions like a beloved book he'd memorized. How could she tell him that their love story was even more complicated than either of them had imagined? "I've been thinking about your wife," she said finally, which was true enough. Jay's expression softened. "What about her? You never really talk about her, about how you met, what she was like. I know you loved her deeply, but sometimes I feel like I'm falling in love with a ghost I'll never know." It was a careful deflection, but also a genuine desire. In all their conversations, Jay had spoken of his grief, his healing, his gratitude for second chances. But he had shared few details about the woman who had claimed his heart first. Jay was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes distant with memory. "Her name was Catherine Rose Montgomery before we married. She was radiant, not just beautiful, though she was that. She had this way of making everyone around her feel special, important, seen." "How did you meet?" "College. She was studying social work. I was in business. She was volunteering at a children's shelter, and I was there doing some corporate charity event, trying to impress my father, if I'm honest. But I saw her reading to this group of kids, and she was so completely present with them, so genuinely caring, that it stopped me in my tracks." Serafina's chest tightened as something familiar echoed in his description. She worked with children? Her whole career. After college, she got her master's in social work and specialized in helping kids who'd been through trauma. She used to say that children were resilient, like flowers. Even if they'd been damaged, they could bloom again with the right care. The coffee cup slipped from Serafina's nerveless fingers, shattering on the stone path with a sound like breaking glass. Because those words, that exact metaphor, was something she'd heard before, in a voice that haunted her dreams. "Serafina!" "What's wrong?" Jay was instantly alert, concerned, reaching for her. What was her maiden name again?" she whispered. "Montgomery. Catherine Rose Montgomery." "Why?" The world tilted sideways, reality reshaping itself into impossible patterns. Serafina felt the blood drain from her face as connections clicked into place, like puzzle pieces, forming a picture she couldn't have imagined. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Oh my God, Jay, What?" "Serafina, you're scaring me." She stood abruptly, pacing to the edge of the garden, her mind racing through memories she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself they were dreams. Catherine Rose Montgomery, born in Tennessee, put up for adoption as an infant, had spoken often about feeling incomplete, like she was missing a piece of herself. "I need to show you something," Serafina said, her voice strange and hollow. "In my apartment. We need to go right now." The drive to Serafina's apartment passed in tense silence, Jay shooting worried glances at his fiancée while she sat rigid in the passenger seat, staring out the window with eyes that seemed to be seeing something else entirely. Once inside her small living room, Serafina went straight to an old cedar chest in the corner, her hands shaking as she lifted the lid and began searching through its contents. Photo albums, letters, documents, the accumulated memories of a life lived carefully. "Here," she said finally, pulling out a manila folder thick with papers. "Jay, I need you to look at this, but first, I need you to sit down. Just tell me what's wrong. Sit down, please." Jay sat, and Serafina knelt before him, the folder clutched against her chest like armor. "What I'm about to show you is going to change everything. Not us, I hope not us, but everything we thought we knew about how we found each other." She opened the folder and pulled out an official document, her hands trembling as she handed it to him. "My original birth certificate, the one I got when I turned 18 and decided to search for my birth family." Jay took the document, his eyes scanning the faded typewritten text. Then he stopped, his face going white as he read one particular line. "Parents, David Montgomery and Ruth Montgomery, née Stevens. Baby girl, born 3:42 a.m., September 15th, 1995. Sister to Catherine Rose Montgomery, age 7. The paper fluttered to the floor as Jay stared at Serafina with absolute shock. "You're Catherine's sister, her baby sister. The one she lost when our parents gave me up for adoption because they couldn't afford to raise 2 children. Serafina's voice was barely a whisper. The one she spent her whole life looking for. Jay felt his pulse quicken as the implications crashed over him like waves. "She wrote to you. Every year on your birthday she wrote letters to you, hoping somehow you'd find your way back to each other. I found them after she died, dozens of them, addressed to my lost sister." "I know," Serafina whispered, pulling another item from the folder, a stack of letters bound with a faded ribbon. "Because I wrote to her too, every year, same birthday, same hope, but I never sent them. I never knew where to send them." They stared at each other across a gulf of impossible revelation, 2 people who had found love in each other without realizing they'd been family all along. "This means," Jay began, then stopped, unable to finish the thought. "This means Catherine brought us together. From wherever she is, she brought us together." Serafina's eyes filled with tears. She loved you. She loved Poppy. And somehow, she made sure her sister would find you both when you needed each other most. Jay reached for her, pulling her into his arms, holding her as the truth of it settled into their bones. "She always said she felt incomplete without you, always said there was a piece of her missing. After she died, I used to dream about her telling me that love comes in waves, first one kind, then another, but it's all part of the same ocean. She used to write in her letters that she hoped I'd found a family to love me. She used to say she prayed I'd get to be a mother someday, even if I never had children of my own." Serafina pulled back to meet his eyes. "She gave me you. She gave me Poppy. She made sure I'd get to be part of the family she loved most." The magnitude of it was overwhelming, the impossibility of it, the beautiful circularity of love finding its way home through the most unexpected paths. "Does this change things?" Serafina asked quietly. "Between us? Does it feel too strange, too complicated?" Jay cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away her tears. "It feels like destiny. It feels like Catherine's final gift to both of us, making sure the people she loved most would find each other and take care of each other. You're not freaked out that you're marrying your late wife's sister." "I'm marrying the woman I love, the woman who saved my daughter and healed my heart. The fact that you're Catherine's sister just means our love story is even more beautiful than I imagined." He kissed her then, soft and sure, and when they broke apart, Serafina felt the last knot of fear unravel in her chest. "We have to tell Poppy," she said. "She's going to lose her mind with happiness," Jay replied. "She's been saying for weeks that she feels like your family, that it's like her mother sent you to us. When she finds out, it's literally true. That evening, they sat in the living room where this had all begun, the three of them together as they'd been so many times before, but with the weight of truth making everything more precious, more miraculous. "So, you're really my aunt?" Poppy asked for the fourth time, her eyes bright with wonder. "Like, actually related to Mom?" "Really and truly," Serafina confirmed. "Which means I've been loving you as my niece all along, even before I knew it." Poppy launched herself across the space between them, wrapping Serafina in a fierce hug. "This is the best news ever. It means you're not just joining our family, you were always supposed to be part of it." As Jay watched his daughter and her aunt, his fiancée, hold each other, he felt Catherine's presence like a warm breeze, like approval made tangible. Their love story wasn't just beautiful. It was necessary, destined, written in the stars by a woman who had loved them all enough to make sure they'd find each other. The second twist had been revealed, but the story was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning, a love story that transcended death, that honored the past while embracing the future, that proved sometimes the most impossible dreams are just love taking the long way home. Chapter 9. The second soul-crushing twist. The wedding planning consumed them through November like a beautiful fever, transforming the Gatsby mansion into a wonderland of white roses, twinkling lights, and dreams taking physical form. Serafina had resigned from her position at Elmwood Academy, finally ready to step back into her true calling. Harvard had offered her a position as a consultant for their gifted youth program, work she could do while being closer to Jay and Poppy. Everything was falling into place with the kind of perfection that made her almost superstitious, as if happiness this complete might tempt fate itself. She was in the mansion's library, addressing wedding invitations in her elegant script, when Poppy burst through the French doors, carrying a wooden box that looked like it had been buried for decades. "Serafina, you have to see what I found in Mom's old room." Poppy's eyes were bright with excitement and discovery. "Dad said I could go through her things for something to wear to the wedding, something old, you know, and I found this hidden behind her desk." Serafina set down her pen, immediately intrigued. In the months since learning she was Catherine's sister, she had become hungry for every detail about the woman she'd lost before she'd ever had the chance to know her. "What is it?" "Letters mostly, and a journal. But there are some addressed to someone named S. Look at this one. The envelope is practically falling apart, like she handled it 1,000,000 times." Poppy held out a cream-colored envelope, yellowed with age, and Serafina's heart stopped. Written across the front in Catherine's careful handwriting were the words, "To my sister S, when we find each other again." "Poppy," Serafina whispered, her hands trembling as she accepted the letter. "This was meant for me." "What?" "S. She was writing to me. We both did it, wrote letters we never sent, hoping somehow we'd find each other." Serafina's voice was thick with emotion. "May I?" Poppy nodded eagerly, settling beside her on the library's leather sofa as Serafina carefully opened the envelope, which was dated just 6 months before Catherine's death. "My dearest lost sister." The letter began, and Serafina had to stop reading for a moment to compose herself. "I'm writing this letter, knowing I may never send it, just like all the others. But tonight feels different somehow. Tonight I feel closer to you than I have in years, like maybe the universe is finally ready to bring us back together. I have so much to tell you, so much I've saved up over the years. I married the most wonderful man, Jay Gatsby. Yes, like the character in the book, but infinitely better than any fiction. He has the kindest heart, the gentlest hands, and when he looks at me, I see forever in his eyes. We have a daughter, Poppy, who is 13 now and brilliant beyond measure, Sometimes I watch her work through complex problems with such ease, and I think of you, wonder if you inherited the same quick mind. I hope you did. I hope whoever raised you recognized your gifts and nurtured them. But I'm writing this letter because something is happening to me, and I need you to know this in case I don't get the chance to tell you in person. I've been having headaches, dizzy spells. The doctors say it's probably stress, but deep in my heart, I'm afraid it's something more. If something happens to me, I need you to know that my greatest regret won't be leaving Jay and Poppy, though that will break my heart. My greatest regret will be that I never got to see your face again, never got to tell you how much I've missed you every single day since they took you away. I've been searching for you for 26 years. I've hired investigators, checked adoption records, followed every lead. I even worked with children all these years, hoping somehow I'd recognize something familiar, some echo of the sister I lost. Promise me something, S. If you're reading this, it means fate has finally brought you to my family. It means Jay found a way to give this to you, which means he found you somehow. Take care of them for me. Love them like I do, and know that somewhere in whatever comes after this life, I'm smiling because my two favorite people in the world found each other. With all my love and all my hope, your sister, Catherine. P.S. Look in the box. There's something I've been saving for you your whole life. Serafina was crying so hard she could barely see, and Poppy was crying too, both of them overwhelmed by Catherine's words from beyond the grave. With shaking hands, Serafina reached into the wooden box and pulled out a small velvet jewelry case. Inside was a delicate gold locket, heart-shaped and clearly antique. When Serafina opened it, she found two photos, one of Catherine as a child, perhaps 7 years old, and one of a baby that could only be herself. She kept your baby picture all these years, Poppy whispered. She never stopped looking for you. There's more, Serafina said, noticing another letter at the bottom of the box. This one was sealed with wax and looked even older than the first. The second letter was dated 5 years earlier, when Poppy would have been 8. Dearest S, it read. Today, something extraordinary happened. Jay read Poppy a bedtime story from a book series she loves, The Secret Garden of Dreams. The author is S.R. Washington, and as he read about Luna learning to embrace her magical gifts, I felt such a strong pull, such certainty, that I started researching the author immediately. I found interviews where S.R. Washington mentions being adopted, being separated from family as a child, growing up in Tennessee. I found photos where I swear I can see echoes of our mother's face, our father's eyes. I think you wrote the books that are helping my daughter learn to love herself. I think fate has already connected us in ways we don't even understand. The irony is so beautiful it takes my breath away. You've been part of Poppy's childhood all along, teaching her to embrace her differences, to see her brilliance as a gift rather than a burden. I've drafted a dozen letters to your publisher, trying to find a way to contact you, but I keep stopping myself. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm seeing connections that aren't there because I want so desperately to find you? But if I'm right, if you're really out there, using your gifts to help children like Poppy learn to love themselves, then I know that whoever raised you did an extraordinary job. You've become exactly the person I always hoped you'd become. Brilliant, compassionate, dedicated to making the world better for kids who feel different. I love you, S. I've loved you every day for 31 years. And if you're reading this, it means that love finally found a way to bring us home to each other. Always your sister, Catherine. The room was silent except for their quiet crying as the full magnitude of Catherine's prescience settled over them. She had known. Somehow, on some level, she had known that Serafina was already part of their lives, already loving Poppy through the words she'd written. She knew, Serafina whispered. Years before we met, she knew you were reading my books. She knew I was already part of your childhood. That's why the books helped so much, Poppy said with sudden understanding. That's why they spoke to me so deeply. They weren't just stories, they were love letters from my aunt to my mother's daughter. Jay appeared in the doorway then, drawn by the sound of their tears, and when he saw them holding Catherine's letters, his face filled with understanding. "You found them," he said softly. "You knew about these?" Serafina asked. "I knew she'd written to you. I knew she suspected you were S.R. Washington. After she died, I couldn't bring myself to read them. They felt too private, too much like grief I wasn't ready to process." Jay moved to kneel before them both. "But I saved them, thinking somehow, someday, they'd matter." "She was looking for me," Serafina said, her voice breaking. "All those years, we were both looking for each other, and we were so close. If she'd just reached out to my publisher, if I'd been braver about trying to find her—" "She would have loved that you found us anyway," Jay said firmly. "She would have loved that fate took care of what they couldn't figure out themselves." That night, the three of them sat together reading Catherine's journal, discovering years of entries about her lost sister, her hopes and dreams for their reunion, her certainty that love would find a way. The final entry, written just days before her death, was a prayer that her family would be cared for by someone who understood the depth of her love for them. She knew she was dying, Serafina realized, reading the last pages. She knew, and she spent her final days preparing for us to find each other. "It's like she orchestrated the whole thing," Poppy said with awe. "Like she made sure you'd be at my school when I needed you, made sure Dad would be ready to love again, made sure we'd all recognize each other when the time was right." As they prepared for bed that night, Jay found Serafina on their bedroom balcony, wearing Catherine's locket and staring up at the stars. "No regrets?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Only that we didn't have more time," she replied, leaning back against his chest. "But Jay, what if we're dishonoring her memory? What if loving each other is somehow betraying—" "Stop," he said firmly, turning her to face him. "Catherine spent 5 years hoping we'd find each other. She knew I'd need someone to love, and she knew Poppy would need a mother figure. Most importantly, she knew you deserved to be part of the family you'd been stolen from." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Jay said, kissing her forehead. "Our love doesn't diminish what Catherine and I had. It honors it. She loved us enough to make sure we wouldn't be alone." As they held each other under the November stars, both felt Catherine's presence like a benediction, like approval made manifest in the cool night air. Their love story wasn't just beautiful, it was necessary, healing, the completion of a circle that had been broken for too long. Tomorrow would bring their wedding, the formal binding of hearts that had already found their way home to each other. But tonight, surrounded by the love of the living and the blessings of the departed, they were already family, already whole, already everything Catherine had dreamed they could be. The second twist had revealed not just connection, but destiny. Not just love, but the fulfillment of a dying woman's deepest prayer. And in the morning, they would begin the rest of their lives together, knowing that some love stories are written not just by the living, but by those who love us enough to ensure our happiness, even from beyond the veil. Chapter 10. Forever United. December 20th dawned crisp and clear, with morning sunlight streaming through frost-etched windows like nature's own blessing on the day Jay Gatsby would marry Catherine's sister. The mansion had been transformed into a winter wonderland, every room glowing with white roses, candles, and the kind of magic that happens when love finally comes home. But for Serafina, standing before her bedroom mirror in Catherine's restored wedding dress, taken in to fit her smaller frame but otherwise unchanged, the most beautiful decoration was the antique locket resting against her heart. You look like a princess, Poppy breathed from the doorway, elegant in her role as maid of honor, wearing a dress the color of winter twilight. Mom would be so proud. Serafina turned from the mirror, her eyes bright with happy tears. Do you really think so? I know so. Poppy crossed the room and took her hands. She wrote about this day, you know, in her journal. She wrote about hoping someday Dad would find love again, and she wrote about praying you'd find a family. She wrote about dreaming of walking you down the aisle herself, since she never got to be at your first wedding. This is my first wedding, Serafina corrected softly. Everything before this was just practice for finding my way to your father. They were interrupted by a gentle knock, and Jay's business partner, Matthias, appeared in the doorway wearing the formal expression of someone entrusted with an important duty. Ladies, the guests are seated. Serafina, your escort is ready when you are. Serafina had chosen to have Phoenix, her younger brother who had flown in from Tennessee, walk her down the aisle. At 26, he was the only family she had left from her adoptive family, and his presence made the day feel complete in a way she hadn't expected. You nervous? Phoenix asked as they stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the transformed living room where 60 of their closest friends and family waited. Terrified, Serafina admitted, but not about marrying Jay, about deserving this much happiness. Sister, Phoenix said firmly, if anyone deserves happiness, it's you. You've spent your whole life giving pieces of yourself away to help other people. Today, you get to keep something beautiful for yourself. The music began, Pachelbel's Canon, the same piece Catherine had chosen for her wedding 20 years earlier, and Serafina felt something settle in her chest, like coming home. As they began their descent, she saw the faces of people who had become dear to her over the past months, Jay's colleagues, her new friends from the university, Poppy's teachers who had witnessed her transformation. But when her eyes found Jay waiting at the makeshift altar, everything else faded away. He stood beneath an arch of white roses and baby's breath, wearing a charcoal grey suit that made his blue eyes look like sky after storm. But it was his expression that nearly undid her, a look of such pure love and gratitude that she had to remind herself to breathe. Beside him, the minister held an open book, but tucked discreetly inside was Catherine's final letter, the one she had written to be read at Serafina's wedding, whenever that day might come. As Phoenix placed her hand in Jay's and kissed her cheek, Serafina felt the last piece of her long broken heart click into place. Jay's fingers interlaced with hers, warm and steady and sure. Dearly beloved, the minister began, we are gathered here today to witness the union of two hearts that have found their way home to each other through paths none of us could have imagined. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, each word chosen carefully to honor both the love they were celebrating and the love that had made it possible. When it came time for the readings, Poppy stepped forward, Catherine's letter in her hands. My mom wrote this for today, she said, her voice clear and strong. She wrote it hoping that someday her two favorite people would find each other. She opened the letter and began to read. My darling S and my beloved J. If these words are being read, it means that love has found a way to do what I could not, bring you together, heal you both, make you a family. S, my sister, my heart, you are stepping into a love that will cherish you exactly as you are. Jay will see your brilliance and celebrate it, never ask you to dim your light. He will hold your dreams as carefully as his own and build a life where you can flourish completely. Jay, my heart, my love, you are gaining not just a wife, but a woman who will love Poppy as fiercely as I do, who will help her navigate the complexities of her brilliant mind, who will be the mother she needs as she grows into the extraordinary woman I know she'll become. Together, you are creating something beautiful from the ashes of loss, proving that love doesn't end with death. It transforms, evolves, finds new ways to bless the people we care about most. Take care of each other, love fully, laugh often, and know that wherever I am, I'm smiling because my family is complete at last. With all my love and all my blessings, Catherine." There wasn't a dry eye in the room as Poppy finished reading, and when she looked up, she saw both her father and soon-to-be stepmother crying openly. "The bride and groom have written their own vows," the minister announced. Jay spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. "Serafina, you came into my life disguised as salvation for my daughter, but you ended up saving me too. You taught me that hearts can break and heal and love again, that families can be born from choice as much as blood, that sometimes the most beautiful gifts come wrapped in the most unexpected packages. I promise to love you fiercely, support your dreams completely, and spend every day proving worthy of the miracle of your love." Serafina's vows came through tears. "Jay, you taught me that I didn't have to choose between being loved and being myself. You showed me that real love isn't about fitting into someone else's expectations. It's about being celebrated for exactly who you are. I promise to love you with Catherine's blessing, to help raise Poppy with her wisdom, and to build a family that honors the past while embracing the future. I promise to be your partner in all things, your soft place to land, and the love that carries you through whatever comes." When they exchanged rings, his grandmother's diamond for her, a new band engraved with coordinates of the school where they met for him, the symbolism felt perfect. Old treasures and new beginnings, past love blessing, present joy. "By the power vested in me and with the blessing of love that transcends time itself, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jay, you may kiss your bride." The kiss was soft and sure and full of promise, and when they broke apart, Serafina saw her own joy reflected in Jay's eyes. Behind them, Poppy was crying and laughing simultaneously, and in the audience, Phoenix was giving a standing ovation that quickly spread through the room. The reception was held in the mansion's ballroom, which had been transformed with thousands of fairy lights and centerpieces of white roses mixed with books, a nod to how their love story had begun. The cake was a masterpiece of vanilla and lavender, decorated with sugar flowers and topped with figurines that looked remarkably like the three of them. During the father-daughter dance, Jay and Poppy moved together to "The Way You Look Tonight," and Serafina watched from the sidelines with her heart full to bursting. When the song ended, Poppy approached her with a small wrapped package. "I have something for you," she said. "A wedding present." Inside the box was a small, leather-bound journal with Dr. Serafina Gatsby embossed on the cover in gold letters. "For your new research," Poppy explained, "about families formed by choice and how love finds a way to heal everything it touches." "It's perfect," Serafina whispered, hugging her stepdaughter, her niece, close. "You're perfect." As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, the three of them stood together on the mansion's front steps, watching snow begin to fall like blessing from heaven. "So what now?" Poppy asked, looking between her parents with contentment and excitement. "Now we live," Jay said simply. "We love each other, we support your Harvard dreams, we write the next chapter of our story together. And we remember," Serafina added, touching the locket at her throat, "that some love stories are bigger than just the people living them. Some love stories are about healing, about second chances, about the way love echoes through time and space to make sure the people who need each other most eventually find their way home." As they headed inside, arms linked, snow catching in Serafina's veil like scattered stars, none of them noticed the single white rose that appeared on Catherine's grave across town, fresh and perfect despite the winter cold, as if placed there by invisible hands that wanted them to know their happiness was blessed, celebrated, and eternally loved. 6 months later, Poppy would graduate as valedictorian and head to Harvard with her parents' blessing and her aunt's guidance. A year after that, Serafina would publish a groundbreaking book about the psychological benefits of chosen families, dedicated to Catherine, who taught us that love never really dies. It just finds new ways to bloom. And on every anniversary of their wedding, a white rose would appear on Catherine's grave, their proof that some love stories are written not just by the living, but by those who love us enough to orchestrate our happiness from beyond the veil of death. Their love hadn't just survived the revelation of secrets and the complexity of their connection. It had been strengthened by it, made more meaningful, more miraculous. They had learned that sometimes the most beautiful relationships are built not just on attraction or compatibility, but on the invisible threads that connect soul to soul across time, space, and the mysterious workings of a universe that believes in happy endings. And as they settled into their new life together, husband and wife, father and mother, family by choice and destiny alike, they carried with them the knowledge that their love story would ripple outward, touching other lives, healing other hearts, proving again and again that love is the most powerful force in any universe, capable of transforming tragedy into triumph and making even the impossible dreams come true. The End, a love story about second chances, hidden connections, and the beautiful truth that sometimes the most profound relationships are guided by love that transcends time itself.